Imagine waking up tomorrow with a machine no bigger than a phone and realizing it can send you anywhere in history. Not to watch from a distance. Not to stand behind glass. But to move through the turning points of civilization like a ghost with knowledge no emperor, inventor, or conqueror could possess. Suddenly, fire is not just fire. The wheel is not just a wheel. Electricity is not just light. Every invention that built our world becomes a pressure point in time, a moment so fragile that one touch could redraw nations, erase empires, and rewrite the future you call home. This is not a list of old discoveries. This is a survival guide for anyone reckless enough to step into history's dangerous moments. Because if you could control the inventions that changed the world, the question is not what you would build. It is what you would destroy. The first rule of time travel is simple. Never arrive at the moment an invention becomes obvious. Arrive earlier, when it is fragile, dismissed, and vulnerable to a single human decision. That is where history trembles. Imagine the darkness before controlled fire, when night was predatory, when cold was a sentence, not a season, and the horizon belonged to teeth, claws, and fear. Then a spark survives. A flame is protected. Someone learns that heat can harden wood, transform meat, change migration, and push back the dark. In that instant, humanity does not merely discover a tool. It steals a piece of the sun. And if you are standing there with the knowledge of what comes next, you are not observing prehistory. You are standing at the first control panel of civilization. One wrong move, one frightened tribe, one extinguished ember, and the human story slows by centuries. But fire is only the beginning, because the most dangerous inventions in history rarely look dangerous at first. They look useful. They look elegant. They look inevitable. The wheel appears so simple that the modern mind can barely imagine a world without it. Yet before it transformed transport, war, farming, and trade, it was a miracle of abstraction, the idea that motion could be reshaped into advantage. Somewhere, a circle stopped being just a shape and became power. Carts followed. Roads followed. Armies followed. Empires followed. This is the logic of invention. Once an idea solves one problem, it begins solving problems no one intended it to touch. A rolling platform becomes conquest. A plow becomes population growth. A writing system becomes bureaucracy, taxation, law, memory, and control. Every invention opens a door, but history never tells you what else walks through with it. That is why a time traveler cannot think like a tourist. You would have to think like a bomb disposal expert moving through objects that can detonate futures. And then the scale widens. You are no longer in a cave or beside a wooden cart. You are in ancient cities, where bronze reshapes warfare, where iron democratizes destruction, where the compass whispers to oceans, and where paper outlives kings. This is where the guide becomes urgent. Because the inventions that changed the world were not isolated strokes of genius floating above history. They were embedded inside hunger, ambition, trade, fear, religion, empire, and survival. Gunpowder does not remain a curiosity. The printing press does not remain a machine. Navigation does not remain direction. Each one becomes an amplifier of human desire. Suddenly, beliefs spread faster than armies. Maps become weapons. Knowledge escapes temples and courts. A ruler with better metallurgy can redraw a continent. A society with cheap printed ideas can ignite revolution before the old order understands collapse. To enter these moments is to realize something chilling. Inventions do not simply change what humans can do. They change what humans want. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because across thousands of years, from the first guarded flame to the first code running through silicon, one pattern repeats. The inventions that promise liberation often deliver control. The inventions that connect people can divide civilizations. The inventions that save time can devour lives. Electricity lights the world, then powers factories, surveillance, propaganda, and weapons. The airplane shrinks Earth, then rains fire from the sky. The internet democratizes knowledge, then floods reality with noise, addiction, and manipulation. So here is the question that should haunt every traveler. if every invention carries a shadow from birth, were humans inventing tools, or were we building the machinery that would control us? To understand the hidden mechanism behind world-changing inventions, you have to abandon the comforting myth of the lone genius. History loves the image of one brilliant mind standing in isolation, pulling the future out of darkness like a magician revealing fire from an empty hand. But inventions are rarely born that way. They emerge like storms from pressure building across generations, materials discovered by accident, questions inherited from forgotten teachers, rivalries between kingdoms, shortages that force desperate improvisation, and invisible networks of merchants, craftsmen, soldiers, and dreamers carrying fragments of possibility across continents. The steam engine, for example, was not simply a machine. It was compressed geology, ancient sunlight buried as coal, human impatience transformed into force. When that trapped energy was finally released through iron, heat, and pressure, the result was not just movement. It was an entirely new relationship between humanity and time. Distance shrank. Labor accelerated. Cities swelled. Production detached from muscle, wind, and seasons. For the first time, civilization could move at a speed nature had never intended, and once that threshold was crossed, there was no true return. Then came the electrical age, and with it one of the strangest turning points in human history. For thousands of years, lightning was a symbol of gods, judgment, and terror. Then suddenly, within little more than a century, humans learned to trap its logic inside wire, glass, copper, and code. The mechanism was beautiful and unsettling, invisible electrons flowing through designed pathways, carrying power, information, and intention across impossible distances. A switch on one wall could command light. A signal in one city could move a voice across oceans. A pulse in a circuit could trigger machines with no memory of silence. But the deeper mechanism was not electricity itself. It was abstraction. Humanity was no longer inventing only physical tools like blades, wheels, and engines. It was beginning to invent systems, networks that connected millions of actions into a single living architecture. Telegraph lines became nervous systems for empires. Power grids became artificial veins for industrial civilization. Communication no longer traveled at the speed of horses or ships. It traveled near the speed of thought. And when civilization begins to move like thought, it also begins to inherit thought's instability, panic, obsession, propaganda, acceleration. This is where researchers uncovered something even more dramatic. The inventions that appear to dominate history often depend on quieter inventions hidden beneath them. The airplane depends on metallurgy, fuel chemistry, mathematics, machining, and instruments. The computer depends on symbolic logic, electricity, miniaturization, war funding, rare minerals, and language itself. Even the smartphone, that glowing object now resting in billions of hands, is less a single invention than a cathedral built from thousands of buried breakthroughs. Mines, satellites, semiconductors, touchscreens, global shipping, lithium extraction, optics, compression algorithms, battery design, and decades of military and academic research all converge inside one small rectangle. What looks magical is actually layered dependence. Remove one key invention from the chain, and the miracle collapses. This means history is more fragile than it appears. Civilization is not a staircase. It is a tower of interlocked decisions, balanced on inventions most people never notice until they fail. And then came the twist. The deeper scientists, historians, and technologists looked, the clearer it became that inventions were not merely extending human power. They were reshaping human perception. Clocks changed how people experienced time. Maps changed how they imagined space. Cameras changed memory. Algorithms now influence attention itself, guiding what billions see, fear, desire, and believe. The tool is no longer outside the mind. It is entering the mind, rearranging behavior in real time. That means the next great invention may not simply help humanity control the world. It may determine how humanity understands reality. And if that is true, then perhaps we are not standing at the end of invention's story at all. Perhaps we are only standing at the moment it begins to invent us. Now the implications become impossible to ignore. If inventions did more than transform civilization, if they transformed human perception, power, and desire, then history is not just a chain of brilliant ideas. It is a record of humanity repeatedly opening doors it did not fully understand. Every major invention expanded freedom for some and vulnerability for others. Agriculture allowed cities, but also hierarchy, labor extraction, and famine at scale. Writing preserved memory, but also enabled control, debt, law, and empire. Industrial machines multiplied output, but turned landscapes black, rivers toxic, and workers into extensions of steel. The atomic age revealed the deepest secret of matter, then converted that revelation into a weapon capable of ending cities in a flash brighter than sunrise. Invention, at its highest level, has always been double-edged. It is civilization's greatest miracle, and its most refined danger. That is the terrifying truth a time traveler would eventually learn. The future is not built by progress alone. It is built by trade-offs so immense they can hide inside triumph. And today, for the first time, humanity is creating inventions that do not merely reshape the world around us, but compete with the processes that once made us uniquely human. Artificial intelligence is not fire, or iron, or electricity in the old sense. It is a mirror made of mathematics, trained on the language, images, decisions, mistakes, and patterns of civilization itself. It can compress centuries of knowledge into seconds. It can accelerate medicine, engineering, education, design, and discovery. But it can also industrialize deception, automate manipulation, concentrate power, and blur the line between human judgment and machine suggestion. Genetic engineering reaches even deeper, touching the code of life once treated as sacred, untouchable, almost mythic. Brain-computer interfaces hint at futures where thought itself may no longer remain private. These are not distant fantasies. They are the modern equivalents of the first flame, the first wheel, the first printed page, except now the scale is planetary, the feedback is instantaneous, and the margin for error may be razor-thin. This is no longer simply about what humans can invent. It is about whether humans can remain wise enough to survive their own creativity. If you could travel through time and control the inventions that changed the world, you might be tempted to stop the most destructive ones. Delay gunpowder. Hide the blueprint of the bomb. Silence the code that gave birth to algorithmic control. But that fantasy carries its own trap. Because remove one invention, and you do not create paradise. You create a different chain reaction. Delay industrialization, and perhaps millions remain in older forms of poverty, disease, and isolation. Prevent digital networks, and perhaps authoritarian empires tighten their grip over disconnected populations. Remove aviation, and continents remain psychologically distant, cultures more divided, crises slower to detect and slower to stop. History is not a clean machine with one fatal switch. It is a living web of consequences, where salvation in one century can become catastrophe in another. The deeper you look, the more unsettling the answer becomes. The problem may never have been invention itself. It may have been the ancient instability of the creature using it. Which leads to the final reflection, the one every traveler must face before stepping back into the present. Humans often imagine history as a march from primitive weakness to modern mastery. But that is only half the story. The other half is stranger, darker, and far more beautiful. With every invention, humanity has revealed not just new power, but new responsibility. Fire asked whether we could survive the night. The atom asked whether we deserved the morning. Artificial intelligence now asks whether intelligence alone is enough. And perhaps that is the real guide hidden inside every world-changing discovery, not a manual for controlling history, but a warning that power without wisdom turns miracles into ruins. Civilizations rise through invention, but they endure only through restraint, humility, and understanding. Because in the end, the most dangerous machine in history was never the engine, the bomb, or the algorithm. It was the human mind, brilliant enough to remake the world, and restless enough to forget what that power is for.